Hey everybody, welcome to GVN Live. This is a brand new episode coming to you live. That was the worst intro on the fucking planet. So anyway, I am Fico
Hey
Pubs,
guys,
and
be
I am being
excited.
yay exciting. So I am being joined today by Emily, Keith, and Mark as always. So going roundabout, how are you feeling, Emily?
Oh, you have to go to me first. All right.
Well, counterclockwise or
I
clockwise. I'm
am
sorry.
I am feeling I don't know. I'm kind of getting over being sick last week, and I'm having some asthma issues, and I'm trying to deal with wrist pain because I had a ganglion cyst aspiration, but it was like in between two bones, so they had to like lots of needles. Let me just put it that way. Lots and lots of needles. But luckily they shot me up with lidocaine, so I didn't really feel anything. But regardless of that, I still was determined to get Resident Evil 7. So, you know, I played a little bit of that. I streamed it on VR this weekend. Mark and Rob decided to watch how horrible I was at Resident Evil 7. And
You weren't horrible. You were just experiencing something new.
well, it was with VR, so I didn't know what to expect. So I was kind of moving a little bit slower than I normally do just because I was like waiting for something to fly out at me. I was expecting it. I mean, don't get me wrong. It was scaring me. It was scary. It definitely keeps me on my toes. But I definitely was expecting scarier. I don't, at least so far. Now I hear it gets really crazy. So, and I'm not nearly close to the crazy part yet. So, you know, maybe I'm wrong and maybe it gets a lot more terrifying. But or maybe I just kind of decentralize myself over it and I'm just like, oh, this is nothing. But playing it in VR is definitely an experience, that's for sure. And yeah, that's it. I was really sick last week, so I didn't play a lot of games. I mean, I did play Marvel. I am trying to start streaming again, so I did stream Marvel, and yeah,
Marvel. At least
yeah,
you're not
that's
screwing
oh
over Marvel like the Evo staff did.
oh
Oh,
yeah. So I'm not gonna typically do like my whatever FGC corner tonight, but I am going to do a couple little shout outs. For example, Winter Brawl 11 next weekend already. It's crazy how time flies since NEC. Granted, it's only about like 2.5 months since NEC before Winter Brawl, but it is next weekend, so it's going to be a fun weekend. We still have a lot of exciting things to announce. We also recently announced a monthly on March 4th. Well, Biggie Gaming did, but I'm part of Biggie Gaming, so it's we. Called Broad Street Battle. So it's going to have a bunch of different games there. It's going to be streamed by two different people. It's going to be at the same hotel that Winter Brawl 11 is at. It's one day event. Street Fighter 5, Marvel, Pokken. Uh, I'm missing some things. Blaze Blue, Guilty Gear. I think that's it.
DOA.
No, I don't think DOA is there. I have to
IR
double check.
sad.
I have to double check again. And we have lots of really exciting things for that monthly to announce in the future. So go to biggiegaming.com and well, not biggiegaming.com, but Biggie Gaming all social media. And stay tuned because that's coming in the next couple of weeks. It's coming actually before Winter Brawl. So next week.
Yeah.
That and Evo. So I am sorry. I don't think DOA is there.
he's being
Well,
facetious. He doesn't give a shit.
Now I'm talking about the monthly, which once we make future announcements, you'll kind of understand why the games we have there are there. Major wise though, Biggie Gaming normally always has DOA. That being said, I'm gonna take it to Evo for a second. Most people know they announced the lineup for Evo not that long ago. and 2 weeks ago, actually, almost 2 weeks ago, and decided that the very last game was going to be you vote. Not only do you vote, but you have to donate money and that money essentially goes to charity. Regardless of that, there are two Marvel. I'm not surprised at how much money that has. But it's really interesting to see how much the Pokken community has stepped it up, because Pokken and Marvel are pretty much almost neck to neck, and this thing ends on the 8th. So it's really up in the air right now on which game is going to end up. I'm not sure exactly how I feel about the voting process. I'm actually a little.
Well, they did it a couple of years ago for a bunch of other games, like when DOA first came out, when the new Guilty Gear, I think, came out, or was it the last version of BlazBlue? I can't remember, but they were doing all kinds of stuff, and that's the one that the Smash community got Melee into Evo for, and how they became a mainstay in the Evo.
The thing is, though, it's different then. And I guess this might go hand in hand with our second topic later, but we're in a different day and age now where voting, especially with how large things have, how large the community has gotten and how big social media is now, I'm not exactly sure voting is the right way to go anymore. At least voting in the way that they're doing it.
Yeah. Well, they're voting with the almighty dollar. That's pretty much how it's going.
Well, I mean, the gamers don't see any of that money. It's all going to charity.
Well, that's it's for a good cause, regardless.
Well, it is for a good cause. I'm not gonna lie. I did a poll on Twitter. I narrowed it down to 4. I wanted to contribute somehow, and I let all the players on Twitter decide. It was a 2-day poll, and Pokken won. I mean, actually, Marvel was winning, and then I went to bed, and I woke up the very next morning, and there was 20 minutes left, and it was like ridiculous. They just, like, the Japan Pokken players got a hold of it, and that was it. So I did end up donating to Pokken because I wanted to stay true to my word. But I think it's hard, because while it is a good cause, it really sucks for other players that are very dedicated to the game, like the Killer Instinct community.
Zig right there has a good point to it. Yeah, voting via making a donation to a good cause or charity does discourage people from doing bogus votes. So, like, you can't have some dude hiding behind a program that will input multiple votes.
That's true.
So, therefore, you can't have, like, all of a sudden Marvel just jumping ahead by, like, 1,000 votes or whatnot.
No, that's true, but I do know there's a lot of players talking online about the fact that they're angry that they were put in the position because they love multiple games and they think Marvel and KI and all this should, be in Evo. And, I mean, I don't know. It just kind of sucks. I understand on one hand why they did it, and on the other hand,
Yeah.
I don't know.
So anyway, we're gonna have to just move on. So
that's fine.
Yeah. So we're gonna move on to Mark. So Mark, what's new in your world of gaming?
I appreciate that you associated it specifically to gaming. I mean, nothing much really. I played Resident Evil 7. I'm 80% done with it, I guess, at this point.
So how far away am I? Just quick question.
Oh, you're like 10% in.
So we get to hear about 90% more screaming coming.
Oh yeah.
So that thing I said when I said that I wasn't that scared much. I mean, it's probably gonna scare me later.
It's gonna get worse. Yeah, it's gonna get about like the first half of the game is really creative jump scares and whatnot. It kind of goes down a little bit as things go forward, but overall, I haven't completed it and I haven't fought the final boss, who my friend Joel beat the final boss and told me that difficulty-wise she's clown shoes. So that's fine. But like for the most part, I enjoy the game. I think it's probably like in the top 5 of my personal favorite Resident Evils. But it's like number 5 out of those. So
yeah.
But I feel like it's a good experiment. I feel like it does what it does in many respects better than similar games like Amnesia and I can't think of the other one.
You're talking about that one game you streamed a little
Yes.
over a year ago, right?
Yeah.
Crap. Now I can't remember it. Outlast.
Outlast. Like it does what it does better than games like Outlast and Amnesia do. And for the most part, I feel like if you were somebody who was not as particularly impressed by those games as I was not, you will probably enjoy Resident Evil 7 quite a bit. I've also been playing the Fire Emblem cell phone game, which is pretty neat. It's like, not my favorite mobile phone game, but the game's been out like 3 days, so I'm willing to cut it a little slack there. I think it's definitely got a better overall structure and framework than other Nintendo mobile properties that I've seen so far. And it's probably going to be the best one in terms of overall content and structure. Right now it's just a dearth of content, but it's literally like 3 or 4 days old, so I'm assuming like probably in 6 months it will end up being like their most notable, if not necessarily their most successful, because fucking Pokemon.
So
I boot up Pokemon Go occasionally, but like, it's eh.
No, I
Yeah.
still do occasionally.
So another
Cold
question I
stuff.
want to ask you real quick, Mark. Any idea as to the possible return of Neo Kobe pizza?
Dude, I'm fucking dying right now, okay?
I know.
I
Okay.
can't right now.
I was
I
just
feel your pain,
thinking if
Mark.
you might have had a timeline of maybe in the next few months or something like that, but I didn't want to.
I need to find a point where I can actually sit down and record with people. I have people who want to record. I just actually have to find the opportunity to do it.
All right, no
Yeah.
problem. All right. So anyway, moving on. Keith, what's going on with you? What's been keeping you occupied?
Right now, pretty much it's still God Eater 2 Rage Burst. I did not pick up Resident Evil yet. I know, I keep on getting like a lot of positive feedback from it, but I'm still like, the jury's out on that one. Just because 6 was so fucking terrible, like and 5 was mediocre at
But
best.
this
So
isn't
that's
6. This is 7.
I understand that, but you know what? Everybody's afraid of 7 because 7, 8, 9. So there you go. But anyway,
Boo!
Really?
Boo!
You watch
Yes.
Of all the
Racing,
jokes you
Deception's a
could
serial
tell, you
killer.
did.
I never said that I was the best. And then Kingdom Hearts came out. I haven't yet put that into my PS4 because again, God Eater 2 Rage Burst has been taking up the good majority of my time. But and of course I get the ... dots now. Thanks.
I mean, you did say because 7, 8, 9. I mean,
You did.
it was
you,
kind of a corny joke, but
you did deserve that.
And then there were 3 people
there were
streaming.
3 people. But no, that's really the only thing that's taken up my time. Just a lot of different aspects in life, so to say. But yeah, that's about it.
Okay, so well, as far as for me going on, hey, I finally beat Final Fantasy 15, and
Yay.
again, I'm gonna stand by my statement. Easily, one of the top 5 Final Fantasy games I've played, core series, not including tactics and all that other stuff. But I would easily say it creeps into the number 5 spot. Camera issues and some plot hole issues aside, I think the game ended rather strongly. It had a lot of things they took risk with, and I think it really paid off. I think it was really well done all the way around. I don't know if you might like this, Emily, but in a nutshell, Final Fantasy 15 is kind of like Kingdom Hearts Light in terms of how it plays.
Huh.
Because I don't know if you were still thinking about playing it or whatnot, but that's pretty much how it feels to me.
I actually have access to Final Fantasy 15 but I just haven't played it yet. Like I have it. Well, technically my boyfriend has it, but he hasn't played it yet. But I have it. So it's just I want to beat Resident Evil 7 first. But I figure since it was a gift to him, I kind of feel like he should get to play it first before I steal his game and play it. So I'm trying to be nice because he tried to play Resident Evil 7 first, and I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Sharing is caring,
I'm
Emily.
playing it
That's all
first.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
He can totally play Resident Evil 7 once I am done with Resident Evil 7. Just like I'm sure he will let me play Final Fantasy once he's done.
By the way, Emily, if if what
Yeah, what
Mark
you done with
says is true, the way you were screaming after that guy chainsawed your hand off, I think you got a
Dude,
long
okay.
journey ahead of you.
You know what? I wanted my hands back so bad. I kept trying.
You were sitting there trying to like just jam it back on into place.
I was. I'm like, there's got to be a way my hand will just go back on. I'm like, eventually I gave up. I'm like, well, since my hand's just sitting in inventory here, I assume it's
That's the best part.
Put it on nice.
Every time I pulled it out, it was like, it's still warm. I'm like, all right, well, as long as it stays warm and it doesn't get cold, I'm good. I mean, she got...
Yeah.
Sort of. It's not exactly a cast, but it's just to keep my wrist up. Yeah, it's to keep my hand, on my wrist. But no.
Yeah. So now let's move on to the our first topic of conversation, or it is involving something that actually just recently came to light. It's about our good friends at GameStop, and shocker, they're up to shady shit again. This one involves kind of a program that was leaked to us by some members of GameStop, and that is that they are now pushing their employees to lie to customers about having new games in stock in order to meet set goals for credit card purchases, used game sales, used console sales, refurbished console sales, pretty much anything they can, including especially like the opened new games that they sell used, trying to get those $50 games now being sold as $90 used games. So,
I feel like it's a little bit. I feel like it's a little bit more complicated than that.
I think it is too. I mean, I tried
Basically,
to...
the way that they're explaining it in the article is more or less that GameStop values percentage quotas based on individual interactions or sales that you perform in a particular calendar week. It's sort of like a commission-based structure.
Yeah.
So if you've ever worked in a commission retail sales floor in some capacity or another, like you get the idea where you get paid out a certain percentage based on what you sell. But in this case, they don't get any commission. What happens is they just have percentage quotas for how many pre-orders they get, how many reward cards they get subscribed, how many used games they sell, and how many game trade-ins they do. And the quota is based relative to how much business that store does. So if your store is a high-volume store, your percentages are probably going to be higher than if you're a low-volume store, and more than likely, like, full-timers would be held more accountable than part-timers. Mm-hmm. The caveat is, from the way that they're explaining it, if somebody comes in and performs a transaction without doing one of these 4 things, that fucks your number. So if you get 10 people in a row who come in and buy a brand new game, whether they pre-ordered it or not, although I'm assuming if they pre-ordered it, maybe it doesn't count. Like, I don't know the 100% logistics, but if they come in and they just buy a brand new game, if they didn't buy a used game, if they didn't subscribe, if they didn't pre-order, they didn't trade something in, your numbers just sat on it. Your numbers just took a shit right there. Mm-hmm. And basically what a lot of employees have been saying as a result of that is, we ostensibly feel obligated to lie to customers and tell them that we do not have things in stock.
If anything, I mean, I'm not shocked whatsoever. I mean, I used to work for GameStop, and I'm not saying this as like the disgruntled employee or whatnot on it, but I'm honestly not surprised. I mean, that's their business model, is they make money off of the used games. So pretty much as when I was a rep way back in the day for this one, just so everybody can get a general idea. Again, this is a long,
you used to work with
long
Reggie,
time.
right?
Yes, I did. I actually did work with Reggie at one point.
He was fired. You know
Wait,
that, right?
Seriously?
Yeah.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah, I did. If anything,
Small
I worked
world.
in the company. I worked in the company before even Reggie started there, and then I came back for a little bit. And but anyway, is when I was a rep way back in the day for this, is that we always had quotas, except for and they always would push it down on you. It was reserves, it was Game Informer subscriptions, way like blast from the past, so to say. And then of course you always had your trade-ins for it, and then I remember every single night we had to literally sit there and figure out like the actual like calculations. Like we did 10% of our business was trades today, 10% of this was reservations today, and they always held it to us. So now that in reality, there's no need for GameStop. There really isn't. Pretty much, you got Amazon, you got like Walmart, you got any of these like these big stores that are doing it. So pretty much, as GameStop's kind of getting the hurting on. So the way that they make money is by selling used games, because if you could take a game in for $10, sell it for $50, there you go, $40 profit. That's keeping your lights on right there, people. And yes, I actually like your comment, God of Zig. Except for in commission, you need to get to keep your job instead, which is effed up.
Well,
Go ahead, Emily.
Going off of that, I realized recently, and this is just because of local GameStop. So one of the reasons I think GameStop is still staying afloat, even though they're struggling, because there is, at the end of the day, Target and Best Buy and other stores physically that you can pre-order games at, is the fact that you can pick it up on the day it comes out. So, I do know a lot of people that pre-order on Amazon. However, you always run the risk of it not coming on time. Or let's say you don't pre-order it, but you're coming home from work and you want to pick it up. You can't exactly pick it up from Amazon. So, in ways, GameStop is good in that regard. The downside. So, we used to have 2 GameStops in my area, and just recently the one in the mall closed. The one in the mall. Now, most GameStops in malls do not shut down. Some of it might just be due to local stuff. It's a lot easier to get to the other one than the one in the mall. But both of them in my area are very, very adamant about pre-orders. Like, they were in the same area in direct competition with each other. And they weren't making not only enough sales, but they weren't getting enough pre-orders. And that's part of the reason why I was told by one of the employees at the mall that they were shutting down that GameStop and transferring what pre-orders they did have to the other one that was in this little town center down the road from me.
Go on.
There's always, I was thinking, sorry. There's always an issue when it comes to anything where you get paid on commission.
Well,
always an issue with that.
Well,
and I
it's
see
worse
that
because I don't even think they get paid on commission. This is just a case where they're saying you have to meet these objectives or you're fired, and
it's ridiculous. They're giving them no incentive.
It's a similar concept, though. It's a similar concept. They might not be getting paid, but it's a similar concept. And while I never worked at GameStop, I did used to work at a bank, and they treated it the same way when I was a teller. Same way. Bankers, tellers, we all had incentives. Every single month, we had to get a certain amount of people to get debit cards and to open up an account. We had to try to convince people to get credit cards, and we wouldn't even get money as tellers, but we would get special points, and we would get, verbal approval that, we weren't gonna, or confirmation that we weren't gonna, lose our jobs and things like that. So it's a similar concept, but it also is like, it makes it twice as stressful because it's the same thing in GameStop. It makes it twice as stressful when they tell you, you better get 10 pre-orders this month or this week, or you're done. I mean, that's kind of, and then so they do what you guys are saying. Oh, we have to get this. Oh, nope, sorry, we don't have this, or we do have it, and you get there like, no, we don't, or like things like that. They start lying because they don't want to lose their jobs. And I'm sorry to hear that, God of Zig. It's unfortunate, and I was very stressed out most of the time because of it, and it's part of the reason why I decided to start getting away from the whole finance things. I worked in a healthcare corporation for a while doing billing as well, and it was the same thing wherever I went. I'm like, you know what? It's not fair.
Well, this is the thing. It's commission sales floors where your paycheck, like just the amount of money that you take home, is dependent upon what you tell people and how well you pitch things, will generally bring out the more unscrupulous sorts of people who want to make a profit. Like, somebody will pull some shit if they're in a commission environment because they might make more money off of it. But you're gonna see that sometimes. If you're in an environment where your literal job is on the line if stuff gets fucked up, I have seen people who I think are otherwise morally and ethically reasonable just compromise all of that because they didn't want to spend the rest of their life eating fucking ramen noodles. And going back to the Best Buy mention, I worked at a Best Buy where we had a sale for like a specific kind of laptop. We told 4 different customers that it was not in stock because they wouldn't buy accessories and a service plan with it.
Wow.
Because the managers were under the gun. Like, as a line level employee, you generally didn't see it, but management had accountability to accessory revenue and service plan revenue. Now, Best Buy's non-commission, so we didn't get any of that fucking money, but if you didn't sell well, your boss was going to go, and you were going to probably eventually get a boss who was going to make your life miserable or make sure you didn't get hours to make sure that they only got the people in there who could sell. And again, going back with the bank thing, the company that I worked for used to specifically do a customer service-based model in their call centers where if you called in, they helped you. And the employees were given cash incentives if they performed at a specific performance level, if they helped the customer appropriately, if they met the guiding principles of the company. You got cash incentives for doing your job well. You didn't have to do anything. You didn't have to lie. You didn't have to bullshit them. Do your job well, you get a cash incentive. Then they changed it to a purely commission-based model based on sales. All of the people that I worked with there when I was in that call center have been fired. And they are at the point now where they are bussing people in who, like, you know, are just basically there for a couple of months because that's how quickly they get shifted out. Because, surprise, nobody wants to get a fucking credit card when they call in to check their goddamn account balance.
Well, no, and that's another issue. Losing customers over it, you know, because nobody wants to be hounded about that. Also, you're losing money at the end of the day. So I just want to talk about that for a second. So let's say somebody comes in at GameStop and they want a game. And the person behind the counter offers, well, that game is packaged with the PS4. Do you want the PS4? Because they have to sell a certain amount of these PS4 packages before the end of the month. And guess what? It's 2 days before the end of the month, and they've sold like 1, and they have to sell like 5 or something. And the person says, no, I already have a PS4. I just want the game. And the person goes, oh, sorry, we don't have the game. And that person leaves and goes to another GameStop or goes to Best Buy or something, and they buy the game. Well, now Best Buy just made money, and you just lost out on money. So it seems almost like a thwarted system wherever you go. Oh, we don't have it in stock, even though we do, because you won't buy the package deal. Yet you just lost out on money
spend
as
the
well.
$3 for disc protection.
But you just lost out on money as well because the person's like, okay, well, I'll go somewhere else where they do have it in stock and give my money to them. And that is like, what, a $60 game? Then you could have made $60, but you chose not to. Like,
Not
seems like
really.
a
I mean,
flaw.
again, is where GameStop really makes their money is with the used games. It's the whole thing. So selling a new game is kind of like a moot point. Is that's not what's keeping the lights on. That's kind of just keeping like the brand, so to say, like selling the new games. That whatever they make off of that. Again, everything that they sell, used games, is what's their real moneymaker. So this is what's kind of pushing them more so towards that. And I still think it's messed up that if you have it, I mean, you're right that at the end of the day, they failed to service the customer. They did, in fact, lose a sale for it, but they don't look at it that way. They're looking at it as, oh shit, we have to sell these because this is what their main focus is for it. I don't want to sell a new game. I'd rather sell this used game because at least I'm not going to get shit for it, so on and so forth.
Well, it's like this is the thing is, if they were evaluating employees based specifically on their performance at one of these 4 metrics in and of itself, we probably wouldn't even be having this conversation. You know, if they were just being evaluated on how well are you doing at these 4 things, it wouldn't make a difference. The problem is that they're holding it accountable as a percentage of your total transactions for the day. GameStop, ostensibly speaking, is a video game retailer. That is their only job in life. That is the only reason they fucking exist. I don't give a shit how much other stuff they try to put in there. I don't care how many times they've stocked HeroClix or Japanese anime or whatever the shit. They're a fucking video game retailer, and that's literally the only reason people go into that store. So, the problem is, by putting your employees in a position where performing normal day-to-day transactions negatively impacts their bottom line as an employee, regarding this as a total percentage of your overall actions instead of just hitting a certain amount of sales per day, you are putting them into that position where they have to lie. And we know this because Kotaku then followed up after the original posting with GameStop's posting like a statement where it said, "Oh well, this does not place pressure on store associates to mislead customers on the value of certain products." So Kotaku then went and got 20 different fucking sources who said, "Yes, it does, and in some cases, our corporate management forces us to do it." So fuck you, GameStop.
I concur. Fuck GameStop.
Now, in regards to, let's say,
I don't know if I can exactly say fuck you GameStop because I pre-ordered like 6 games I really want coming out this year.
It's weird, like,
you
throughout
know what
the
I mean?
years.
Listen, hold on.
I have mixed
Amazon
feelings.
Prime.
I have very, very mixed
Get Amazon Prime.
things about games.
Yeah,
I do have Amazon.
I Amazon Prime too, and I'm
Pre-orders through Amazon. You will get like 15% off for pre-ordering through them.
Exactly.
you save almost
am not
you save almost $20 off of brand new games. I just
How did I
pre-ordered.
not know this? I've had Amazon Prime for like 3 years. Really?
I pre-ordered the Elder Scrolls Online Morrowind Collector's Edition, which is about $100, and I just saved $20 on it.
I will.
Yeah, but like, does it actually like come like
give
on
me the name of a
time?
game
Yep.
You just pre-ordered.
Usually it does, yes.
Give me the name of a game you just pre-ordered. Any one. I don't care.
Tekken,
Tekken 7.
God of War,
We'll go Tekken
Marvel,
7. All right.
Injustice. I can give you a long list of games.
Tekken 7, PlayStation 4. Free shipping for Prime members. Pre-order price guarantee $50.99. As a Prime member, I get it for $47.99.
Yep,
What?
that's the benefit of paying $90 a year.
And free shipping.
Oh yeah,
It's free.
What?
Well, okay. Why are you not? But
sometimes
I'm-
free same-day shipping if you're lucky.
I'm gonna
huh?
right in the camera there. Damn it! Why are you being a dick about this?
Yeah.
But yeah, the issue is that for many years now we've been hearing about some shady shit that's been coming out of GameStop, and there's always like this continuous cycle of, okay, controversy arises. There's a huge uproar. Everyone bitches about the uproar. Then all of a sudden everyone says, "Oh, we're not going to support GameStop anymore." 2 days later they're pre-ordering the next Call of Duty. So pretty much it's just like this endless cycle of like, maybe next time they'll piss me off enough just to stop going. But then you know, like you were just saying, like we can always take our business to someplace like Best Buy or Walmart. I mean, even though Walmart has a rotating catalog of games and an extremely
I see
small
it,
one.
Mark. I know. It's cheap. It's cheaper. I know. It's just I always get like nervous about it coming in the mail because one, I don't know if it's gonna come on time. What if there's a shipping issue? When I could just walk into a store and be like, "Hey," but then again, cheap sounds nice. You know what I mean? So
I mean, it's like $13, like $13 off. I'd do that.
Yep.
I do it now. Like I get all my games through Amazon. I have not been into a GameStop in a year and a half.
yeah, I can't say
There
that.
you go.
Same thing. But just to quickly touch on the same thing, you know, I don't, and this kind of, I guess, goes a little bit hand in hand with the next topic, but I remember when before GameStop, when it was EB Games, and then GameStop.
You mean when
GameStop
GameStop consumed EB Games and Funkoland?
Yes, I'm thinking specifically of when I was like 15, 16. I got my first job at a Haagen-Dazs and a mall, and across from Haagen-Dazs was an EB Games. And so whenever I was on break or after work, I would always go in there and I would look at all the games. And that's actually how I got my first Nintendo 64. I just went in there one day and they're like, if you buy 5 of these $5 games, we'll give you a free N64 and controller. They actually did too. I got a free system and controllers.
Nice.
Just for $25. It was pretty cool, and it still works. But anyway, totally besides the point. The point is, they didn't really have a lot of incentives like that then, because really, it wasn't until like another year or so until even Toys R Us started selling video games, and then still the main.
What do you mean started selling video games? I remember walking
they
into
were
an,
always selling video
I
games.
remember walking into a Toys R Us in
Toys R Us?
'88 and looking at like Mega Man on their
no,
little
they had-
display
Toys R Us
screen and
had
stuff like that.
games. Toys
Well,
R Us-
was
I
inside the-
don't know. When I left my job at Haagen-Dazs, I started working at Toys R Us briefly when I was in high school, and I remember they.
I remember when you had to.
Even in the song, it says from bikes to trains to video games. It's a big.
I'm old.
Biggest toy
I-
store there is.
Well, it's like this
I'm a
is
very old 28-year-old, but no, seriously.
28-year-old. Jesus Christ,
That's it.
I
I'm
think
done.
I'm
I give up. I give up.
here.
you might be.
Am I? Am I seriously?
You're
How
the
old are you,
youngest out
Keith?
of us.
Keith, aren't you my age?
Neither confirming nor denying anything at this juncture.
You are the youngest person here, Emily.
Oh, okay. Well, still, regardless. Okay, fine. There were video games at Toys R Us. Regardless, GameStop was still the place to go, despite that. And they didn't really have a lot of this stuff going on at the time. It really wasn't until the internet became a really big thing, and Best Buy became popular, and all these other places became popular, and they started offering their own incentives that I feel like GameStop had to start coming up with new,
Yeah.
not
One of the major
best
reasons
option
why people
ways
are going to
to
still
sell.
keep going back to GameStop is mainly because GameStop has this thing going on with the video game companies for exclusives, whether it's DLC or just being the only ones being able to sell that game, which is, kind of stupid, but whatever. It doesn't hurt other businesses as much as they think though, because it's usually, what is it, like an exclusivity deal for about maybe a month at most.
Well, it's all about downloadable content at this juncture, where it's like, who gets the best downloadable content? Do you get Do you get that golden lancer? Do you get that golden lancer? Biggest bed.
It's like when the Smashing Pumpkins Billy Corgan reformed the Smashing Pumpkins, and his new album with them was released with an exclusive song, but it was a different song for each retailer. Like, there was a different song for Target, a different song for Walmart, a different song for Best Buy, and like, whoop-de-doo. It was not a real major incentive. There was no reason really to go and buy all 3 CDs. It was just one song.
And then everybody just ended up downloading it on iTunes anyway.
Yep. So anyway, let's get some final thoughts. We'll start with the former GameStop employee, the disgruntled GameStop employee, Keith.
God damn it. I'm not disgruntled. I'm very loving. Damn it. I love GameStop. No, that's a flat out lie. But anyway, is that again? I think that GameStop is kind of just hurting at the second. And this is kind of why that their employees feel this. And like Mark was saying, is that effectively these people are under fear of losing their jobs, and they're not giving any incentive other than you'll be fired. That kind of makes you feel like, oh, I kind of have to do this sort of shady. And again, also, GameStop really does push it onto the employees, at least from what I can remember. I'm going to play the PC one on this one because I can't confirm and or deny that this still does go on. But from what I can read in this article, sounds like it's the same shit, different toilet. But
And they're missing the toilet.
no, it's just that they just don't care. It's just all, and they're just kind of forcing it upon them because they know that they're just beating a dead horse at this juncture.
Mm-hmm. Mark, your final thoughts on the matter?
GameStop as a company entirely brought this situation upon themselves, and the fact that they are punishing their employees for the short-sightedness of the corporate entity is just fucked to me. Because here's the reality. Used gaming is a completely viable market. That's a completely reasonable thing to offer. The problem with the situation is that GameStop saw that there was a profit margin to be made and specifically created an environment where they paid virtually nothing for video games and cashed in on that to the point where they made an extensively large amount of money and turned that into a business model. And they got fucked for that because the PC marketplace is almost exclusively digital download at this point. Consoles are slowly going in that direction. And more websites are popping up to facilitate gamers being able to trade their content or sell their content at still less of a loss than they would take from selling to giving it to GameStop. So there's ultimately no benefit. Even the people that are competing with them in the used game market are giving the people trading those games in a better profit than GameStop is. They done played themselves, and now they're desperately trying to fix the situation because their reputation is in the toilet. Nobody particularly likes them at this point, even if they shop there. And they're hemorrhaging money because they bet on the wrong horse. It sucks that people are being punished in this way. I feel bad for the employees, but as far as GameStop goes, they're absolutely fucking lying. Nobody fucking believes them. Nobody would have fucking believed them before that statement came out, and I honestly hope the company goddamn dies.
Sounds about right.
Sorry, but I'm not sorry. Fuck 'em.
No, I
Fuck 'em.
concur with him. I concur. That it's definitely, again, they backed the wrong horse on this one, but
Emily, do you want to really follow that?
This is all I'm gonna say. Despite the fact that I just pre-ordered a bunch of games there, and I will go to GameStop whenever I want a game, I have to agree to Mark and Keith to a certain extent, especially in regards to the fact that even if I do shop there, I'm not really a huge fan of GameStop. Not anymore. Like when I was younger, yeah, but as I got older,
it's because it was fun to go there. Like literally, they had gamers there. Now it's just like these warm
Businessmen, salesmen. That's all it is. They're all salesmen.
The one thing I'm gonna say is, yeah, the salesman aspect gets annoying. I can't even just go in there. I know what I want when I go in there. So if I'm gonna pre-order a game and I pre-order the regular edition, not a collector's edition, I don't need you to try to convince me why I should pay $70 more than what I'm already paying when I say, no, I'm good. I don't want that. I don't have the money for that. I don't need it. And they try to convince me why it's a good idea. No, I already know what's in the collector's edition. I don't need you to tell me. Another problem is other GameStop employees trying to, talk to me about fighting games, but they don't actually understand what they're talking about. But you get to But I don't need the coaster with the game logo. You know what I mean?
Yes, you do.
I don't need.
You don't even know you need it, but you need it.
I totally need it. Why don't I have it?
Look, they don't even give you physical shit for pre-ordering anymore. It's all fucking
No.
DLC and
Yeah.
crap DLC.
No, exactly. So I mean, it's tough for me, in my opinion, because I don't want to see a game store die. Like Mark, I mean, I know Mark is all for it, but I don't want to necessarily see them die. But at the exact same time, they got to do something to switch it up. Like, I don't think it's fair what they're doing to their employees, first of all, and secondly, I will tell you that at my local GameStop, they have a new manager there. And the new manager keeps telling me that he is planning on having tournaments and that he's been trying to convince the regional manager to allow him to do so, to have midnight releases and tournaments. And that is something that my area GameStops have not had before. Now, that gives me a little bit of hope. And they weren't necessarily like the GameStop I'm at. They'll ask you once if you want a collector's edition, and if you say no, they'll let it go. But I've been to other ones where they're on you until you're ready to be like, I don't want this pre-order anymore, buy and you leave. Because I actually did that once because this guy was harassing me, and I'm like, you know what, I'll just come back later. And I left. But I mean, maybe they can redeem themselves. I don't know.
I don't think so. My thoughts on the matter at hand is that I agree pretty much with Mark and Keith at this point. You know what? GameStop has dug a hole for themselves with nothing but missteps every step of the way up until now, and they're just pretty much, just scrounging and finding ways to, get that extra dollar to just so they can survive for the next, year or so. GameStop, I used to like going there a lot. I had friends that used to work there, and I used to go there. Even when I wasn't buying games, I would just go there just because it was an awesome environment to hang out in, hang out with my friends, talk some, shit with them, whatnot. Hell, I've been to a couple of midnight releases where I was in the store when it was closed after hours. I was playing Halo 2 3 hours before midnight launch in the store. The guys, I was good friends with the store manager and all of them. It was a wonderful environment, and then just to see how all like you were saying, Emily, it went from gamers to salesmen. And it's a horrible environment, and I would hate to see people lose their jobs. But if there's one thing that I do want to see come back, it's more mom and pop game stores, to be truthfully honest, because they're the ones who really do a good job in regards to selling used games, whereas GameStop will jip the hell out of you. I'd say that's something I prefer, but at the same time, I mean, it's a matter of, again, convenience. Like, if I can't find a game that I want on Amazon, which, as rare as that is, I can just run around the corner to GameStop and grab it, which is...
I mean, you know what? Like, the thing that really frustrates me is I used to love going to GameStop.
Yeah.
There were, over a period of years, there were 3 different GameStops that I would frequent, where I would make friends with the people that were there, and it would be like a good relationship where, like, they bullshit and whatnot, and like they understood that I was a consistent and good customer. Like, at one point, like, for one of the stores that I went to, like, if I got advanced review copies, I'd bring them in and let the people there like goof around with them on like company time, because it was just, I liked hanging out with these people. I thought they were good people. And then every time it would just be like mass store turnover because some kind of sales shit, and I'd walk in one week and it would be like nobody there that I recognized and everybody had been fired. 3 different stores? Fuck off. Like, I don't want to see any company go out of business. I don't want to see people lose their jobs. But I absolutely want the people who run GameStop now to lose it. I want some other company who has a fucking clue what they're doing to take that company over and run all the fucking management out of it. Because the people that are managing that company now don't know shit from apple butter.
This is extremely true.
This whole extremely and I think true. On that note right there, we shall move on. So our next topic is actually going to be an interesting one. It's kind of a giant what if. Let our imaginations run wild, see how things might happen with deduction and all that fun stuff. Yes, we're going to travel back to the 1990s and imagine what if YouTube and Twitch and other services like that were around in the 1990s. How could the gaming landscape have changed? Would it have been for the better, for the worse? Would Sega be out of the console business? Would Sony still be the king of the console business? Would the 3DO have had a chance in hell to actually survive more than a couple of years? So, as much fun as this is, let me start. I think in regards to, streaming services and YouTube services, I mean, the rise of Let's Play and all kinds of other stuff. Yeah, we'll assume bandwidth was actually adequate back then. I can't really...
I want it to be all broken up in my mind. I want it to be so cheesy. Come on.
Yeah, can you imagine streaming on a 56K?
Let's assume that Al Gore did a better job of inventing his internet, and we got buy-in for fiber optic, and like fiber optic was somehow introduced in the 90s.
Yeah, let's assume that. But you see how a lot of games have, pretty much it went, how some games in like the 90s were cult status. Like you got the few people who would play those games. Well, some of those cult status games, grew in popularity thanks to like Let's Plays and speedruns that were going on YouTube and on Twitch. And I think that, let's say, all that wonderful stuff was going on in the 90s, I think it might have, blown up like a whole lot of things. I think working design games would have been a hell of a lot more popular. I think, we might have had a bigger RPG boom than what we had going on in the 90s. I think I think the war between the Super Nintendo and the Genesis might have even gone to a whole new level. Let's get your guys' takes on this. So let's start with Mark. What do you think?
I think if we had been in a position where in the 1990s we had services like YouTube, Twitch, and other such things equivalent, since we kind of have to extrapolate that a lot of the other technology is around right now, I'm pretty sure that in 2017 we'd be up to 8 girls, half a cup. That's number one.
Yeah.
Half a cup. They just have to like share it. I don't know.
Oh, God.
I'm glad I still haven't seen that video. So moving on.
But
Oh, God. Why?
why not?
Uh,
I feel like, um, I feel like all of the things that are happening now in the community would have happened then, and I think we would probably be at a point because like the thing that we have to kind of realize is the tech still not would not have necessarily involved to support all of this stuff. Like,
No.
there's only so much supposition you can go with. It's easy to believe there was an internet that had like a decent amount of bandwidth. It's pretty difficult to imagine that they invented like the Xbox One in fucking 1995 or whatever.
Yeah.
So, most likely what happens is we go through a lot of those same cycles then that we're going through now, only it's kind of a lot worse. Like, I think probably the biggest change is who would be our big people in the community. So, like, PewDiePie doesn't fucking exist in this world.
no.
Do you think, let's say, channels like, I don't know, G4 might still be alive, but on
G4 would have been an internet channel from jump. It would not have been a television channel. They would have marketed it purely as an internet-based channel to capitalize on that. It would have been basically, it would have been Screw Attack before Screw Attack existed.
Well,
And
what
yes,
about
it would still be
GameStop or GameSpot? They had a kind of like a TV show for a little bit. You think that might have
GameSpot would
transitioned?
almost certainly be a direct competitor to that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
GameSpot, IGN, and
Tech
G4
TV,
would probably be our top three sources of gaming news and information because they were always on the cutting edge at the time, and there's no reason to believe that that would be any different. Gaming journalism would probably, at this point, be worse than it is because we only got to a point where we can have a critical evaluation of gaming as an art form once the technology kind of got to a point where we could start having those conversations seriously in a public space. If we were trying to have the conversation about gaming as an art form in the 90s, one, what the fuck are you going to hold up to fight against the Roger Ebert of the world who tell you that you're stupid? And two, exactly how much serious conversation are you going to have about that? Listen, I loved Chrono Trigger. I loved Earthbound. That conversation would have fucking shit itself before it got anywhere. The problem is that now at this point, gaming journalism has kind of sort of started to evolve itself, and there's a lot of growing pains, let's be clear, to a point where we're starting to have conversations about what part of social justice should video games play, if any? What political aspect should they play, if any? Are video games truly art? What artistic things can they accomplish? And we're having intense, interesting, complicated discussions that are populated with a whole bunch of douchebag trolls on the periphery that nobody with any degree of intelligence gives even the smallest fuck about. I'm talking to you, every single person that 9Volt ever places on his Twitter. The point is that if this had happened in the 90s, all of those questions would have come up, and they would have been answered with a resounding no, comma, and go fuck yourself, period. Video games would be worse now if that had happened, because we wouldn't have had the technological frameworks to support any of those conversations, but we still would have had them. The answers would have been kind of terrible, and we wouldn't really feel like going back to them now.
So you think in the long run we might have actually regressed in a huge way? So like you're talking about like you're coming up with the let's say all that.
It would have absolutely become a much larger proposition. Conversation and criticism about it would have become much more like the Ouroboros, the snake that eats its own tail. It would have been very insular. It would have been very up its own ass.
I was gonna say forever, but
right now, outside of like GameSpot and IGN, nobody gives a shit about internet games journalism unless they're invested into the culture to the amount that we are. Like a Polygon is not getting that many hits in comparison to IGN or GameSpot. They rule the fucking world like the goddamn Omega Man. But they get hits. They have a marketplace. If we had gotten to the point where gaming became a major fucking mainstream internet-based thing and all of these overnight celebrities showed up and started marketing gaming as a thing, just at the time that the PlayStation was turning video games from the shit that nerds did to the shit that everyone does, can you imagine how much of a douche bro culture gaming would be now?
Yeah, he has
No, that is a
point.
good point. I mean, it was one thing when you had minor celebrity endorsements like, oh, hey, Tony Hawk's got a video game franchise, and, minor things like that going on, like the occasional maybe movie star that will say, oh, hey, I enjoy playing this game and that game, but, like...
Shaq Fu.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Not only that, how much of a piece of shit were you when you were 15?
I wasn't so much a piece of shit as I was a cocky, arrogant asshole. But...
I was more of the quiet, shy loner kid that, couldn't make friends, so...
Okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, I was there too,
Imagine
but-
if Twitch had existed with everybody screaming first and
I played
Cox
video
and
games
everything else.
with myself, nobody else. No one, except for my brother. When I would convince my brother, who was 8 years younger than me, to play with me. But other than that, I mean,
Yeah.
I was.
Imagine if we had a world where 4chan existed in the 90s.
Okay, there's a lot on this topic I want to discuss. So
Okay, but let's try and keep it at least focused on gaming for the time being.
That's an important part of gaming.
It is. I mean, internet culture is still very much an important part of the gaming.
Regardless of your opinion of it, I'm sorry, I do have to mention it. Regardless of your opinion of it, Gamergate came from 4chan. Imagine Gamergate happening in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And Hubs, you're mentioning the fact that let's keep it focused on gaming, but the reality is, if YouTube and Twitch could not have existed in... Well, I'll wait until my turn unless I'm allowed to talk now, and then I'll...
No,
get-
go.
Well, I
Not
think
go,
I know
not
what you're
go.
trying to say, but I mean,
Nope.
I understand that
Look,
YouTube was existed as a fan creation website for user-submitted videos and all that.
That's the thing. So you look at when there would not be any YouTube and it's partly what Mark was saying, but there would not be any YouTube or Twitch if it wasn't for the technological advances that we made, including internet. So if you go back and you look, while AOL, existed in the early 90s, I think it was originally developed in the 80s, but it really wasn't public. I mean, at one point in the early 90s, they were selling it to the public. It was on a disc, but it was God, what was it? I think they were charging an hourly rate for the internet. Imagine that for a second. An hourly rate for the internet, which of course it was not very popular. Who wants to pay an hourly rate for what was crap compared to what internet is today? But you look at, I think they partnered with Time
Warner
before they became America Online. But when America Online came out, which I believe the internet really didn't get popular until close to the end of the 90s when they started getting popular. That being said, that's when most people started using dial-up, AOL, and there was no internet really explored publicly at the time, and AOL didn't really start dying out until Microsoft said, here, free internet, and here's Internet Explorer, and that is really a lot of where the shift in internet happened in that time frame, which was going late 90s going into the early 2000s. So you could see it's rapidly evolved over the last 20 years. That being said, you can't... Yeah, no, I knew it was founded in the 80s, but the problem is, even though it was founded, it was not public. It wasn't like what internet is today. Mostly companies used it and things like that. It was barely anything from my own research in the past, but it's also difficult as well, because what gaming are you going to have? The PlayStation and the Xbox and the N64s and all that, they weren't technologically advanced enough to even stream on anything.
Well, let's address it this way as a tech concept, as a conceit. backbone internet was being created in the early 80s by what was at that point DARPA and being created into DARPANET. Let us make the supposition that around this point, somebody invents fiber optic technology, because that doesn't require that much of a logical leap in terms of backbone technology. And instead of doing the heavy cable wiring that we're doing with copper wire and things of that nature, we do fiber optic at that point. Then suddenly, around like the early 90s when AOL comes around, we realize instead of using dial-up services, we can use this fucking fiber optic cable that we wired for cable internet, and holy shit, this can handle some pretty amazing damn speeds. From that perspective, you can get to a point, it requires a little stretching, where theoretically you can say, we've got 100 gigabyte internet in 1995. Tech-wise, yeah, your computer probably wouldn't have been able to parse more than 10 or 20 megabytes, but we can kind of stretch a little bit and make the supposition that hypothetically they could develop modems that worked around that. To answer the question of how would the gaming tech have handled it, I think if they had introduced, because remember, they were doing dial-up modems during the Genesis and Super Nintendo era when Weapon Lord came out. That was the only game that worked for the fucking thing, but they were doing it. If fiber optic internet at a decent speed had existed at that point, I think you probably would have seen the Sony PlayStation come with an internet type add-on, and you would have started to see devices like that hooked up to the serial port that allowed for what we do now with our USB pass-throughs and things of that nature. It wouldn't have looked great necessarily, but from a speed perspective, you can kind of sort of like imagine it as like like a steampunk 1995 kind of.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's another question. I mean, granted, we can use all this, suppose it.
No, let her do her.
That's why I stopped.
To go off of, oh my god, what was I gonna say now? Thank you, Rob, for ruining my.
I started talking first, but go ahead.
I couldn't even finish my point before Mark.
Right, I just wanted to qualify the idea.
I know, and I'm just speaking from, fine. All right, let's go back. Let's hypothetically say internet is the way it is now. Let's say that was created in like 1995, and we have all the technological advances and systems that we have then. I think that see, this is a hard question, because honestly, at the end of the day, the saying where you can't really change the course of history, and if you do, everything else will be changed. I mean, look at, you know what I'm saying? Like, so first of all, this would change my life. Part of the reason why I'm so involved in, being very open and public about gaming and trying to advocate for it, is because of the technological advances that allow us to all connect together and be a part of a community that we enjoy. So, for myself, I didn't have that. So my whole life would be different. This would change everybody's life. It wasn't until I got older that this was possible. So you're talking about changing the course of the whole entire, not only just the gaming industry, but the websites, the news articles, IGN, like all of that would be completely changed and different. And it's hard to say, exactly where it would honestly be today. I mean, but you can't have it without every single aspect of technology being developed. And Mark was talking about, is gaming an art form? Is it this? See, I personally believe it is. It is art. You're creating art. It's like telling us.
But that's not the argument that I'm making. I'm not making the argument that it is or it isn't.
I know. Just trying to touch on everything, I guess. Hold on. So discussion how important is technology?
Well, here's a simple thing that we can start.
Technology. You can't have streaming or YouTube without the evolution of technology, and that includes gaming as well. Because as technology advanced, gaming was able to advance as well in the various different ways. I mean, look at the first, stabs at VR when we were younger in the 80s and 90s. They were bad.
Sure,
They were
absolutely.
they were bad. Yet, and I tried a couple of them, and now look, I had the PlayStation VR, and that is a huge accomplishment, and that is not something that could have been done in the 90s.
Sure, but internet communication technology isn't that system intensive. I don't want to get too heavy into the nuts and bolts of everything.
Yeah.
But everything works off of a simple. The model isn't technically hold up. We don't actually use it, but it works off of what's called the OSI model, where you have 7 different stages where shit starts as the input that you the thing that's on the screen, the input that you're giving, the physical aspect of it, and then drops all the way down through how it's encoded, packaged up, and sent offward. If we had gotten to a point where there was probably something like fiber optic grade internet on a neighborhood by neighborhood level, because again, remember, we had cable, and cable was eventually repurposed for this sort of thing. All we're really doing is presupposing that we figured out a way to make that sort of communication technology work in the 90s, which we kind of were, just not on the grand scale. We had modems and that thing. All we really have to do is make the assumption that the communications tech is there. And I mean, having a 10 megabyte network card in your PlayStation probably isn't that far fetched. It's just a matter of adoption, how quickly we standardized things, how quickly everybody adopted it, stuff like that. Because most of the major strides that we've made have largely just been because there's been one governing body that's been stepping in and saying, this is the new shit, you're gonna follow it. If we had IEEE stepping in a lot quicker and a lot more consistently back in the 80s, the protocols that we have probably would have advanced a lot further.
Yeah.
So it's a little far-fetched, but it's not impossible.
No, and I don't think it's entirely impossible that we couldn't have had what we have now, starting in the 90s. I mean, I just think.
Well, here's a simple thing.
I just think the world it's hard. I just think the world would be completely different now. I don't think. I'm hesitant to say it would have been as successful as it's turning into right now.
It almost certainly wouldn't have been. Well,
there would have been so many problems because I don't feel like the world would have been ready for that advance of technology at that time.
True, but also remember, in the 90s we had money.
That's true. That's very true.
Speaking of money, let's do a hypothetical thing right here. I mean, we've already talked about the concept of can the technology be viable and all that fun stuff. Getting systems streamed and whatever online video content. What about the corporate side of things? How would Sony, Sega, and Nintendo and 3DO capitalize on the ability to have press conferences live online, showing off their wares, where the only way you could see it before through journalism was waiting every month for something to show up at your doors in your mailbox, or the E3 conference, and maybe catching a glimpse of this stuff on TNT when GameSpot TV would play. So Keith, what do you think?
Well, here's the whole thing. I mean, you were really kind of saying, as far as with the big companies, I think Nintendo would have made a killing, if anything, because they had the money back in the day, so they could have really showcased a lot more of their products versus through that particular medium, but then you wouldn't have such amazing stuff as Nintendo Power, for example, because that was the print media. I think that most of these bigger companies probably would have been really interesting to see. I would have liked to see Neo Geo to kick ass, if anything, because there was no such thing as a bad Neo Geo game back in the 90s, if you think about it. But as far as really what they were, if anything, I have this really fun idea in my head as far as if it were back then. But then Mark brought up a really good point of if it did happen in the 90s, can you imagine what it would be like now? It would be horrible.
It would be.
But back in the day, I think that it would have been full on, pretty much really good campaigning. Because you remember back in the day, Genesis does what Nintendo don't. And now that you have this whole new medium, to effectively do this, because you couldn't really say too much crap on television like you can nowadays. Like, if anything, you could say shit, and then all of a sudden everybody's all like, awesome. But no, you couldn't do that stuff on television. The fact that they would have had this open, I think that it would have been totally much more funnier in my mind, if you think about it. But it's probably
The Sega Saturn commercials certainly would have been interesting.
exactly. It's like, what are you waiting for? You wait for
Speaking
Nintendo
of gaming
to make
as
this?
art, yeah, those commercials
I mean,
were something
they're
else.
already pretty horrible, so horrible that they're amusing to watch. Just go on.
Oh, you should have seen
YouTube
Sega's ads back then in the mid-90s.
Oh, you
Oh,
can
they were-
find that. You can find them on YouTube. I only bring that up because a couple
Like
weeks ago I
magazine
was
ads were
watching.
just as bad.
Were they?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Remember the tennis the Virtua Tennis ad, which was like a whole page of a bunch of naked guys and this old dude just sitting in the room, and that's promoting Virtua Tennis for the Dreamcast. Like, what the hell?
Well, exactly. If you would have had that, marketing would have been interesting as all hell, is what I'm really getting at.
Yeah.
I would be completely honest here. I think that if, like, from a marketing and, like, presentation and, like, figuring things out perspective, out of all of the companies that have come and gone from the 90s till now, only 2 companies actually see their fortunes changed by the internet being that capable in 1995. Only 2 of them.
My guess.
Nintendo and Microsoft.
Microsoft.
That's it.
You think Microsoft would have jumped into the console market at that point?
Oh yeah, I 100% do. Microsoft only got involved with Sega in the first place because it was an easy inroad for them to figure out the ins and outs of the situation with Windows CE being installed on the Sega Dreamcast. And it was a great way for them to get that sort of thing going, because at the time they didn't necessarily have that idea in place. If you had high-speed internet available in 1995, Microsoft would not have paired with Sega. Sega would have shit the bed on the Dreamcast regardless, because look, let's be perfectly honest. Sega has been very stupid for a number of years. The Saturn would have still died a messy, painful death. And the one thing the Dreamcast had going for it, the entrepreneurship of internet capability, would have been fucked. Nobody would have cared because they would have already been seeing that in the PlayStation and the Saturn. So the Dreamcast's one claim to fame would have been nothing. It would have sold even less units than it did.
So Sega would have just
Nintendo
really
wouldn't
bit the
own
bullet
Sega
hard.
now.
Yeah, Sega would have just fallen apart with the Dreamcast, same as they did.
Now you're saying Nintendo and Microsoft would go on, but what happens to Sony?
Sony does the exact same thing they did in the first place. Sony was a smart company about how they did their stuff. They have their entire R&D division already set up. They invested in internet. It was as soon as it was reasonably feasible to do so with the internet adapter. They have made a lot of very smart decisions, and they're a company who owns so many fucking patents that they could afford to make fuck-ups and mistakes because they're just a massive company. Sure, they've lost shitloads of money in their other divisions, but listen, they own Blu-ray. They own CDs. They're not going anywhere for a while, so they can afford
They own
to
the
take those
Walkman.
steps. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Well, no, see, at the end of the day, I mean, if you go back and you look, Microsoft really did, I mean, the Xbox didn't come out until after the first PlayStation did anyway. I mean, they were the last one to join on when it came to the actual consoles. I mean, they had PC gaming, but if you go back and you look at when each one was launched, they
Sure.
were kind of the last ones to jump in.
You're 100% correct, and that's why I'm saying Microsoft would have a different fortune. Let's start with Microsoft. That's a simple one, right?
Yeah.
Microsoft originally
much,
gets
yeah.
involved in the console marketplace with the original Xbox. Prior to that, they assisted Sega with their Windows CE based operating system that was on the Sega Dreamcast. It's like a modified version of Windows CE. But for all of those of you who wonder why the Dreamcast also shit the bed as hard as it did, piracy. Because it was super fucking easy to pirate games on a system based in Windows. So Microsoft, in this reality, is already the company that's looking to do stuff with the internet. They invented Internet Explorer. They had a huge internet profile, even when the 90s were starting and they were trying to be the default web browser. They had MSN. They would have seen video games being a thing, and with the tech able to support it, it's pretty reasonable to assume that they probably would have invested their own money instead of in helping Sega to create a console, in getting their own console out there in, what was that, the 6th generation? So that probably would have been, they probably would have launched something around the same time as the PlayStation, if not like towards the end of the PlayStation's lifespan. They would have jumped in earlier and likely would have had the same basic success rate that they did. Sega would have been screwed either way, but they would have been screwed harder without Microsoft's backup on it. But Microsoft almost certainly would have gotten involved much earlier. Panasonic was never going to be a success with the 3DO. That system was a piece of shit. I'm sorry.
Yes.
It's an enjoyable piece of shit, but
Oh yeah, but it's a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And SNK was never going to make like a system that was going to be any better than the Neo Geo.
or affordable.
Like they invested all that money into that arcade-based system. If anything, arcade-specific companies probably would have been damaged by this more because the arcade would have died faster. Can you imagine a world where Dance Dance Revolution doesn't exist? Because this is that world.
Mhm.
Man, you made it seem so bleak. Damn.
So like,
No, but-
what about
but in
other?
it-
What about other consoles that like you don't like? I mean, yeah, the 3DO would probably have bit the bullet a lot quicker. Jaguar would have bit the bullet before it even came out. What about something like, let's say, experimental like the Apple Pippin, which has that online connectivity right out of the box and all that stuff?
Oh, Apple was going to do that crazy shit for years, no matter what. It was not going to be a success regardless. But Apple gonna Apple. They were going to do that shit no matter what. Nintendo is the big wild card there, and I think the major reason why their fate is different is because they are now in a position where they are forced to deal with the reality of internet during a time period where they are more tech obsessed and still trying to be the number one company.
Mm-hmm.
When Nintendo was forced to deal with the idea of internet, it was like in the middle of the GameCube's lifespan when they were kind of transitioning over to that idea of, we can't be the number one tech company anymore because it's too expensive and we can't invest in that the way Microsoft and Sony can. Let's be the company who does interesting things instead of the company who is technically the best. So they would be in a position now with the N64 just coming up where they would have to consider the technical viability of it, and they would probably have gotten their tech frameworks set up better. Can you imagine going into a world where the Wii not only is the system that it is, but its internet framework actually works worth a shit?
No friend codes.
Nintendo as a company at that point probably would have been able to sustain the lead that the Wii had. Like,
Now-
I don't think they come out of that generation, substantially better, but I still think that they come out much better than they did right now.
Now, you touched on, the online aspect of the consoles. How do you see Microsoft, if they're one of the two console makers still around at that time, let's say Xbox Live Arcade and, let's say, the Nintendo Network, how do you think those will evolve if, they took off, let's say, in the mid-90s?
I think that they exist when the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox launch, and I think that they suck.
So we don't get, like, the massive amount of user-friendly interfaces and, like, extravagant, like, online store and all that crap. We just get, like, bare-bones minimum tech or something like that, right?
Sure, because the technical hardware specifications of these consoles still have to adhere to that time period.
Yeah.
Like, just because you've increased your communications backbone doesn't mean that all of the other tech is advanced. That requires a lot more supposition that I'm not even remotely in a position to entertain. Unless we discovered, like, unobtainium under the fucking ground or some shit. So, the PlayStation OS and the Xbox OS were still garbage. Because that was what those systems could handle. So you still have shitty storefronts that probably... It's basically the Ouya storefront at this point. For all storefront. There's going to be games on there that you can pay for, but there's not going to be a lot of them, and the whole framework isn't going to be great. We also have to remember, just because transmission has advanced doesn't mean storage capabilities have.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a world now where you can install a 1 terabyte hard drive into your fucking console, and that will probably cost you under $100. At that point in time, like, a 100 gigabyte hard drive probably was like $200. Like it would have been much harder to store stuff like that.
Well, no,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at how thin cell phones are now becoming. I mean, the first cell phone I got was this big clunky thing, and it could barely have anything on it.
You can
Now you
kill a
get
person
these
by
little
throwing it at them.
skinny. Now you get these little like skinny, thin phones, and they keep making them like thinner and thinner. Yet you can keep twice the amount of, you know,
Mm-hmm.
stuff on it. Videos, pictures,
That's
games.
what your 56 gigs can fit into your hand right now.
So-
You look at the little SD cards that can hold how much video and photographic footage. Yet back then, I mean, and this all goes back to my whole entire point, and partly Mark's point as well, that we would definitely see changes, but I still don't think it would be as successful as it is today if it was remotely done back then, because we just would not have the type of support that we need, both in the world and in technology. We just were not technically advanced enough, even in our brains and in reality with machines.
Right, the stuff
Shit.
we would have been uploading would have been crap.
Yeah,
It
like
is the key
what would
thing.
be the point?
It would be
At the end of
uploaded
the
with a
day,
max
I mean-
resolution of 640 by 480.
But I mean, by the alternative comparison, though, to be fair, remember what we used to think were good graphics.
Yep.
Oh yeah, I go back and I play some games I was obsessed with when I was a kid, and I'm like, I don't remember this looking so shitty.
So-
Yeah, exactly. We would have thought this was the most amazing fucking thing. Holy shit! I can upload a video to and let people watch me playing a video game. Sure, the game looks like ass and I sound like shit because our technology is still kind of, but it's like the first time you saw the 30-second long video, like the 30-second long movie of a guy sneezing. People thought it was fucking witchcraft. Like, if they had introduced like Twitch back in the 90s, even if it looked and sounded like shit, we would have fucking loved it. We would have fucking like watched that shit.
All right. So anyway, a fun little idea to think about here. Well, it's probably not going to be fun. And you mentioned it, like some of the negative aspects of the cost of having all this technology back in the 90s, and console companies will probably disappear. What do you think are some franchises that probably never would have arisen if at the expense of streaming services and all that fun stuff, high-end internet appearing as early as we are speculating, like you just said, Dance Dance Revolution. And Lola, of course, was not happy. She wouldn't want to live in that world. So, Emily, what franchises do you think, unfortunately, would not have been around, or have come from such a quick evolution of technology? Like, I don't even know if I worded that right.
I know what you're trying to say. Well, I definitely agree that some of the arcade machines, like Dance Dance Revolution, stuff like that we see today, we wouldn't have. So arcades, hands down, we would see die. I'm not even sure they would pick up, and they've been picking up a little bit more recently, but I think they would just be done. I'm not sure we would still see them today if that was the case. Man, that's a tough one. I would have to say,
Well, personally,
repeat the question again.
like,
'cause
what
I'm trying-
franchise do you think would not exist? Because due to the fact that technology arose and some companies would probably just fizzle out. Like Mark says, Sega would have fizzled out real early. 3DO would have fizzled out really early. Like, let's say, the Sega would have probably not even survived the Dreamcast. Like, I probably would never have been able. There would probably be no Phantasy Star Online franchise, for instance. I don't think that would have been because the internet would not be special when the Dreamcast came out.
Honestly, if we became so technologically advanced so quickly, and the internet just is what it is now back then, I would have to say that I'm not even sure any of the consoles would be as successful as they are now. I feel like we might actually have seen more of a rise in actually PC gaming, just because of the fact that that's really where it started. I mean, most games started on actual computers. It really wasn't till most of the consoles came after that. I'm taking it all the way back to like floppy disk and shit, and if it advanced that quickly, I think Microsoft and other companies like that would have focused more on PC aspects, and it would have been able to advance more that way quicker than consoles. I think consoles might have actually struggled a little bit more. I wouldn't necessarily say that they wouldn't be successful, but I think in the beginning they might have some
That's a good point, actually.
difficulty.
That's a good point, because Doom was able to be played on the internet when it first came out in like the very early 90s. Imagine a world where playing multiplayer online on Doom is the easiest thing in the world, and consoles have to actually like adapt to that. That's a good point.
Right, like, so what's the point in getting a console if you can play it on the computer? When I was a kid and the internet first, started getting really popular, I played more games on the actual computer than I did on my handheld consoles and things like that. It wasn't until I started getting a little bit older that I started playing more on my actual consoles than the computer, because then I had to get a laptop, and you can't play any of the larger games that much on a laptop than you can on a PC. And that has to do more with technology. Now you can be portable with your laptop, but you can play limited amount of games on your laptop as opposed to the PC. If you go back to that time when it was more popular to play games on the PC and technology advances that quickly, it's going to be a lot easier to play it on a computer than it is to have to worry about hardwiring a console to do the exact same thing.
All right.
And it,
what I actually think would kind of have an impact, and I didn't mean to cut you off, Emily. I'm surprised you would bring it up.
That's my main point. I actually think that consoles would have struggled more, and that PC would have actually had a larger rise in regards.
So in regards to my question, you think thousands of gaming franchises would have evaporated,
or at least shifted over to the PC.
They would have still been making games, but it would have been making games for the computers as opposed to consoles, because it would have been more easy to make it for the computers in that time period than it would have been to make for consoles.
Yeah.
If I may interject, if anything, I'm surprised you wouldn't bring it up, Emily, is I think that a lot of the, even though they would still be around, don't get me wrong, but I think that all the fighting games that we've seen up to this point probably wouldn't exist at this juncture, or there would be some sort of different form of it that it wouldn't be, like example.
Oh yeah, fighting game ports to the PC back in the 90s, they were pretty much horrendous. I mean, at the same time, it was pretty hard to make a standardized controller that could be used on the PC. And, I mean, I had the old Gravis Sidewinder controllers. Those were horrendous to play Mortal Kombat 3 with, I'll be honest.
Well, then, in that regard, I would have to say that we probably wouldn't see arcade sticks, because arcades would have been died so quickly at the time that there would be no point in arcade sticks. So you would have been playing fighting games with controls on a keyboard. So it would you have a point there. It would be a lot different. But then again, they could develop something for the computer, or
well, that's what I was.
You know what I mean? Like we'd be playing fighting games different, but I'm not sure it would actually be gone.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There would still be fighting games, but a lot of these games that you had to go out, like, if anything, we were saying Sega would have gone down the hill. So you wouldn't have had cool games like Virtua Fighter, for example. And that, if I'm not mistaken, and please everybody correct me on this one, so I do apologize for my ignorance in advance, you wouldn't have games like DOA, and then you wouldn't have games that pretty much falter into, like, Tekken after that, so on and so forth.
Not necessarily.
Well,
you would
Tekken
still
probably would have existed.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, because those companies were making those games, so they could technically make those games for the computer. It would be different, but it would be for the computer.
Virtua Fighter did get released on the PC, so
I think the bigger issue as far as the fighting game aspect of it goes is you're now going to be in a position where people who are used to playing these on consoles, which are only just starting to dip their toes into the idea of internet playability, are now going to have to move over to the PC, where controller standardization is a major issue, to try and learn this sort of thing. And we have to get over the hump of going in with the idea of suddenly having to learn how to develop like frame perfect netcode for these things, because fighting games more than any other genre suffer from frame delays in netcode, and it's a lot harder to I would say online experience wise, fighting games are the hardest games to program for, because literally if you're a frame off, it can fuck an entire combo.
Honestly, there might not even be tournaments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The FGC
honestly,
probably
let's
wouldn't
be
be what it is.
Esports might
You
not
can-
even exist. How are
Hold
you
on,
going
you
to
can-
carry big computers to an event?
Well, we've been doing LAN parties for years, so that's.
Oh, yeah.
But on one hand, fighting games could very well have shit the bed and died off because of all these issues. But imagine if you live in a world where Capcom, Arc System Works, Namco have had 20 years to figure out frame delay and netcode instead of 5. Can you imagine a game launching with pitch perfect netcode every time?
No,
In
but
a
that
world
would be
where
nice.
in a world where you've had 20 years to refine that shit, that's much more of a possibility.
It would just be for the computer.
Yeah. Now, for me, from my personal perspective on it, you want to know a genre that at a best case would be completely different from what it is right now, and in a worst case wouldn't fucking exist?
Go on.
The rhythm game genre.
Yeah, I was thinking you were going to say that.
Parappa the Rappa was basically the first rhythm game for all logistical intents and purposes. There were experiments in other places. That was the first general rhythm game that existed. And nobody really paid money for that game, and it died like 2 games later. That franchise was put on the shelf after the second game came out. Sony still considers Parappa a mascot, but they do nothing with him. We now live in a world where the arcade is dead. DDR never comes out. Bimani style never exists. Harmonix never gets the idea to make Rock Band because they never see Konami do it in the first place. Konami never sees the success of music-based instrument games and never invents Karaoke Revolution.
And all the Japanese people are now officially sad.
The bars are quiet with no one singing.
With as much as we hate Konami now, it needs to be said, Konami is the reason the rhythm genre exists right now. Because if they hadn't made DDR what it was, and then in Japan hadn't made all of the Freaks games what they were, we would not have the modern rhythm game. The end. If you disagree with me, you are objectively fucking wrong, and I will fight you in real life. You can bring Joe on here, and he'll fucking back me up 100%.
I mean, let's be completely honest. It just wouldn't be. I mean, it just wouldn't be what it is today. I mean, you wouldn't have all the things that you enjoy today if it was so technologically advanced back then. It had to do.
No, we'd have Call of Duty. We'd still have Call of Duty.
Yes,
But-
we would. And
I'm not saying you wouldn't have things that you enjoy. I'm saying that there's a whole lot more that was done. A lot of
To be
really.
fair, I don't enjoy Call of Duty.
Oh my god. My point is there would be a lot more of a variety of lots of different exciting technology things that we would not ever have had. I mean, like you brought up fighting games, they would not be what they are today. In fact, we might not even have fighting game tournaments, in that regard. And yeah, sure, you still have Call of Duty and you still have, Halo and all that, but
well, I think the
There's a
first-person
whole lot-
genre would still survive regardless for it.
I gotta be honest, if internet capability had been as good in 1995, we would probably have Marathon 7, not Halo 5.
Yeah, probably.
Can you imagine a world where Ultima Online didn't suck?
Can you imagine a world where Microsoft was the #1 video game company?
Oh, they kind of were
Yes.
for a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about like consoles not being that popular and computers. I mean, you gotta wonder if those who are making consoles don't start going into, making computers and developing hardware on that in that time to try to get with the times, and technically then they'd be following in Microsoft's footsteps.
Now, I think Sony and Microsoft both eventually try to expand the console market in a different direction, but it still largely ends up in the same position it was in. Because here's the thing: you can't making computers, manufacturing computers, is an extremely low profit market. Like you don't make computers as a company exclusively if you want to make money. Like, which is why so many companies that did make computers have died off. It's not a profit world.
Unless you're
Um,
Alienware.
unless you're Alienware and you sell shitloads of markup on your custom gaming PCs, right? Exactly. But I don't think you could have really marketed that idea. Like, there couldn't have been too many companies trying to do that stuff because at that point, it's all one universal environment.
Oh, and
I
then
think I
sorry,
think
go
more
ahead.
than likely you probably have a couple of companies trying to build those locked down environments, whether they're in the PC world or whatever. They're trying to build those locked down operating systems. And we end up with the console war, but maybe just with custom OSs. I feel like you still have console wars. It's just maybe with different OSs in the PC marketplace that are proprietary and play the best games on the best tech.
Well, I'd
Yeah.
have to wonder. I'd have to wonder if Nintendo, uh, their handheld Game Boy Color, DS, all that, if that would have even been successful.
Can you imagine the Game Boy Color coming out in '99 and having online, and we could play Pokemon online from the get go?
And we
No
didn't have,
more
we
Game
didn't
Link where you have to literally sit across from each other and attach one cord to the one Game
Yeah,
Boy Color to
but
the
we
other.
weren't at
That
a
would be
point where we
nice.
hadn't advanced beyond infrared. I don't think that would have happened.
yeah. So let's
Ugh,
just get some
that
final
infrared
thoughts.
was
So
horrible,
I
too.
guess we can all say in agreement that we are happy with the way technology has evolved, with Twitch coming out at an appropriate time and
Yeah.
YouTube as well. Uh, And thankfully, the landscape it's pretty decent. I mean, sure. I mean, some things still didn't turn out so well. I mean, Sega's just a mirror of a shadow of its former self and whatnot. But apparently, it might not have. It would have been the same regardless of Twitch and YouTube, existing back then. Some final thoughts on the matter, just for shits and giggles, and then maybe let's get the okay from all of you guys. Do you want to answer some more questions from the audience? It seems pretty lively
I
today.
would love to answer
Oh.
some questions from the audience.
All right,
I will answer a few, but I do have to get going soon.
same here. But so let's just get some final thoughts, and we'll keep them. Let's keep them pretty brief. We'll start with you, Keith. Your final thoughts on technology of YouTube, Twitch, and all the gaming goodness of the internet.
Okay, so if these things were to actually have happened back in the day, don't get me wrong, it would have been interesting as all shit just to watch, just to see it from back, like us growing up with it, so to say. It would have been very, very interesting because again, they kind of didn't know where this was going, so on and so forth with it. I think that, like you said, that Twitch and YouTube kind of launched at the right time, but you know what? I'll go out on a limb and say it because I know Mark won't say it. I'd buy that for $1. I would have liked to have seen it, but
I actually had a plan for that.
You
God damn
bastard,
it.
you ruined it. And
Son of a bitch.
that was
Keith.
fucking bogus, dude.
That was
Okay,
totally
there.
not
There goes
me,
our
not
horrible
me.
lingo. Keep going.
But again, I think that it would have really hurt a lot of things, but also I think that it also would have been interesting to see how it would have gone. But also, like Mark said, to the very, very good point is that can you imagine all this shit going down back then as opposed to now for it? And how much worse would it be now versus what it would have been back then? So, I don't know. I think that it was a fun little topic to think about, but now that have the harsh reality in my mind, I'm like, God damn, everybody's right. It would have been horrible.
Emily, your final thoughts on the matter.
I have to. I mean, my final thoughts are that I am glad that. I mean, pretty much like he said, I'm actually glad that it didn't advance that quickly back then. I'm glad that we had that time for a lot of these companies to experiment and evolve. It's been really great being able to see how technology has evolved. There's a period of time in my childhood when there was no internet, there was no cell phones. I say there's no internet because, let's be honest, my parents didn't have internet. And so, therefore, even though it existed in small quantities in the 90s, they didn't have it, so I didn't have it. So I grew up playing outside and playing on, my little handheld things and on the computer and stuff like that. That was it. I had to spend more time in the real world. So
Translation: our childhoods are better than all y'all's.
it's really, I mean, for me, it's always interesting to go back and to look at how far it's come. When you think back to your childhood and then playing on a floppy disk, and you think back to now, we don't even need CDs anymore. You could just download a digital file off the computer and play it. I mean, I would be really sad because there's a lot of things I enjoy now that I wouldn't have, that I wouldn't get to enjoy. And there's a lot of things now that I feel are leaving a really important mark on the gaming community, and we're seeing an important rise in the gaming community, and we might not have had that. We might not have had that back then. So I personally, I think it would have been bad. I honestly do. I think it would have been really bad, and I don't think it would still be around today. At least I think there'd still be games, but I don't think like even competitive gaming would it might not even be around today. It might have died out at a certain point just because it couldn't sustain itself. So,
All right. Mark, your final
long
thoughts?
story short, I like the way things are.
On one hand, the idea of a world that exists where high-speed internet existed towards the end of the Genesis to the beginning of the Genesis SNES to the beginning of the PSX Saturn era definitely has its downsides. No rhythm games, the death of the arcade in general, the fact that we almost certainly still have Call of Duty, all those sorts of things. There are definite downsides to it, but listen, at the end of the day, we also face the possibility of living in a world where PewDiePie and JonTron are scrubbing fucking bathrooms in a Taco Bell. And listen, you know what? I'll buy that for $1.
He said it. Man.
All right. So the show is practically at an end. People, if you have any questions you wish to ask us, we will happily answer them for you. So please ask away anything. We will take a few questions. If it remains dormant for, like, let's say a minute, then we're going to have to wrap it up. So real quick, I just want to say that the next episode of GVN Live will be February 20th. So 2 weeks from now, because we do it bi-weekly, February 20th at 9 p.m. Eastern. Also, I just want to mention my other two shows that I do. My weekly show, Game Jam, which is every Wednesday at 9 p.m. This week, I have my buddy Rich Salhani joining me, and we are going to play some Gunstar Heroes. Woo!
I love that game so much.
And on Thursday is my other weekly show, which is 3 vets and a noob, because I introduced my friend Rico, who was a guest on this show last year, to Phantasy Star Online for the very first time. So now I have a weekly Phantasy Star Online strain that I do every Thursday. So so far I don't see any questions popping up.
Follow me on Twitter at Jamelian. I will put it in the chat. I mostly play fighting games, but I play other games too. Yay!
All right. So first question comes from Zig. How does games being online so much earlier affect the social growth attitude of gaming? Assuming there's
Cocks everywhere.
I was gonna say,
yeah, pretty much.
Black Cock sounds about right.
You think the kids that are playing Call of Duty now are immature? You should have seen us when we were that age.
I think trolling would have been worse.
Yeah.
I think trolling would have been worse. I think harassment would have been way worse than it is now, which is a scary thought, especially for females that are trying to get involved in gaming. And I think it would have imploded on itself.
Like Emily should have had like a glass of wine while she was saying that. Like it would have been
Like,
included on
yes.
I do though. I just don't think society was ready for that at that time.
No, not at all.
Thankfully, I mean,
I feel like we would have evolved to a point where all of our cursing and slang words would be spoken in the Khoisan language.
Yeah.
can you imagine, the evolution of certain slang words or curse words from if they started off earlier with the online interactions? Like, can you imagine people saying asshat as back in 1995?
Can you imagine all the exciting and new homosexual slurs that we would have?
Oh my god.
Listen, Mofo.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how many different terms we would have invented for having sex with your mom?
Oh man.
Yo, let me bag.
It would have sucked is the key point of that dissertation.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll wait a couple more
You damn
questions
asshat.
since they're not flying in. Mark, I mean, I know you don't have any new episodes on the horizon, but maybe we got some new fans in the audience that would like to listen to some of your podcasts. Would you like to give a shout out about it?
Apparently a bunch of people are still checking in with it consistently, which is
That's good.
kind of nice. So you can check in with my podcast, which will hopefully be updating at some point soon. I don't know. Neo Kobe Pizza, the only gaming podcast that floats in soup, over on SoundCloud.com/MarkBWriting. You can also follow me on Twitter at MarkBWriting, as it says there. I say stuff sometimes.
But you say some smart stuff.
Mark has failed to mention that I will finally be on his podcast at some point soon, hopefully, because that did not happen last year. And I will be on one of Rob's shows, March.
Let me double check.
I don't want to promise anything until it happens. We got to
You
record
t-
first, and then I'll start hyping it.
That is true.
I'm just saying at some point. That's why I said at some point. And Rob, you told
March
me
1st.
I have a message. I have proof. So you can't lie to me.
That is true, and I have you pegged for March 1st. We still need to determine a game and whether or not you want to be here in person or just want to play something online.
Yeah, we'll figure that out.
Yeah, we'll figure that out. All right, so it looks like we are not getting any more questions, so that means we are going to wrap things up. I would like to thank everybody in the audience for joining us tonight. It was a lot of fun. Emily, Mark, and Keith, thank you so much, as always, for being a part of this wonderful experience.
Of course.
Thank you.
Once again, the next episode of GVN Live is February 20th, so please tune in. This is Fight Club Hub signing off, and keep on gaming.
Keep on keeping on.